Senator Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in 2019, we spent about $4.5 trillion. 2020, we did the CARES Act, and that was bipartisan. Everyone agreed out of uncertainty, kind of an emergency. I think we spent too much there. And we didn't need, if we had not shut the economy down to the extent we did, now that we know the healthcare information that came around sooner or later, $6.5 trillion. But then you've got 21, 22, and 23. So is it legitimate to get off of the baseline of where we were before with trillion-dollar structural deficits when we were spending $4.5 trillion, taking in about $3.5? Do we need to keep at a level that was based upon something extra normal? Is it healthy, and can we cede the territory that we need to be where we are to have a healthy federal government, and should it be occupying that much of our GDP? So in other words, just because you were able to spend it and borrow the money to do it, is that the new baseline that we should operate on that takes us up to 25% plus of our GDP? Or should we go back to where we were before the extra normal spending took place in the first place? We'll start over with Mr. Zandi again.
Well, those are a lot of numbers.
But that's where we are. Those are actuals.
I need a spreadsheet to disentangle all of that. But let me just say this, Senator. The fiscal problems we have today are ecumenical. They're both Republican and Democrat. I'd
agree.
The Trump tax cuts were $2 trillion, and they were not paid for.
Well, and that's $200 billion over 10 years, so put it in per year.
The fiscal response to the pandemic, which was bipartisan up until the American Rescue Plan, but in 2020, that was an additional $3 trillion, ecumenical. Both sides agree to that. And then the $2 trillion in the ARP, that was Democrats.
Yep.
So it's the situation we're in now is both on both parties.
And I'm talking about going ahead.
And
go back to the original baseline, or should we be at the elevated level?
I think we need to get government. I don't know precisely where it should go because I have to look at the numbers more carefully, but that the spending as a share of GDP has to get back down to something close to 20 to 22%. Where I think revenue should be is where spending's got to get. And it shouldn't get there next year. It doesn't need to get there in the next 5 years. It doesn't even need to get there in the next 10. But there has to be a clear path to that over the next 10, 20 years. If we can accomplish that, if you can accomplish that, we're golden.
20 to 22%. What about the other panelists?
I'll just add that. I think spending has grown rapidly in the last couple of years. And I will add that discretionary appropriations themselves have grown 23.4% in the past 2 years. And so the idea that any cut to discretionary appropriations is going to be a devastating starving of the government, it's grown 23.4% in 2 years. I don't know how that level has to be the sacred floor that will cause chaos if we go below it. I think that at some point we have to align spending growth with the economy and the fundamentals and the deficit.
Well, Senator, I'll make my answer quick. I work for the Bipartisan Policy Center. We are the only organization in the District of Columbia with the word bipartisan in its title. Now, as an economist, I'm not sure that's a supply problem or a demand problem, but it is a problem. And what I would come back to is say with the chairman's offer to sort of put back in the NC White House bill, and your point about trying to get a process in place is very, very important. And that should be in some ways get the debt ceiling, get a budget, make that priority number 3, Mr. Chairman. To your point about where we should go back to, it is pre-COVID baseline. We all kind of agree here that somewhere tax revenues may, and I'll use the word may, be able to go up to 20%. I'm not sure we can do 22, but maybe 20, and spending should be close to that. Spending average is about 21% of GDP on average, right? So you get that little range you have.
So most of our heavy lifting has to address spending, and it's a question of timing, how you get it back to a sustainable level.
And also think about the incidence of tax and where you could have different sort of tax policy. Maybe think about a carbon tax or a financial transaction tax instead of relying on labor so much or income for your tax revenue.
Thank you.
And here to that last comment, may I say.